There is a moment in every falling man's story where he reaches out his hand. Not for glory. Not for a contract. Not for a headline. Just one hand, extended toward the one person he believes still might catch him. Munetaka Murakami boarded a flight to the United States alone. No agent. No publicist. No team representative sitting beside him in the cabin managing the optics of what he was about to do. Just a 24-year-old man, a carry-on bag, and the kind of quiet desperation that doesn't show on the face but lives somewhere deep behind the eyes. He had one destination. One purpose. One name on his mind. Shohei Ohtani. The man who had been his teammate, his idol, his compass during the most important night of his baseball life. The man to whom he had sent that midnight message, the one nobody has fully explained, the one that started a conversation the rest of the world was not invited into. Murakami traveled across the Pacific to apologize. To fix what he had broken. To look the greatest baseball player on the planet in the eyes and say the words he could not say in a press conference or a prepared statement. What happened next was not forgiveness. What happened next was the kind of rejection that changes a man permanently, the kind you don't recover from quickly, and the kind you never fully forget. Ohtani looked at the hand Murakami extended toward him. And walked away. The decision to travel without representation was not accidental. It was a statement. In professional sports, when a player in crisis travels somewhere important, he travels with people. An agent to control the narrative. A PR consultant to manage the optics. A trusted teammate to soften the atmosphere in the room. The entourage is not just comfort, it is armor. It signals that the player still has infrastructure, still has people in his corner, still has enough standing in the industry that others are willing to invest their time and reputation in his recovery. Murakami arrived at the airport with none of that. People who saw him there, and in the age of smartphones, there are always people who see you, described him as unusually quiet. Not the quiet of a man who is composed. The quiet of a man who has already had the argument with himself 100 times and has simply run out of things left to say internally. He was dressed simply. He carried his own bag. He checked in without drawing attention to himself, which for a player of his profile in Japan is nearly impossible under ordinary circumstances. The fact that he managed it speaks to how deliberately he had planned this to be private. Sources familiar with the situation say that Murakami had reached out in advance, not through official channels, not through agents or team liaisons, but through the same private line he had used for that midnight message. He had asked for a meeting. He had been given no clear answer. But he came anyway. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this story. He came without a guarantee. Without confirmation that the door would be open. He simply bought a ticket, packed a bag, and flew 12 hours across the ocean on the hope that the person on the other side would be willing to hear him out. That is not the behavior of an arrogant man. That is the behavior of a desperate one. Before Murakami could reach Ohtani, he had to pass through another door. And that door was shut firmly in his face. The Chicago White Sox organization had been aware of Murakami's travel plans within hours of his departure. In professional baseball, these things travel fast, agents talk, front office staff communicate, and a suspended player moving toward the team facility without authorization is exactly the kind of situation that triggers protocols. White Sox CEO Tom Ricketts did not wait for Murakami to arrive at the stadium. He issued a directive in advance. Murakami was not to be granted access to team facilities. He was not to be permitted meetings with coaching staff. He was not, under any circumstances, to be treated as an active member of the organization while his suspension remained in effect. The language used internally, according to sources close to the front office, was deliberate and unambiguous. This was not a temporary cooling-off period. This was not a procedural formality while paperwork was processed. The CEO's position was that Murakami had caused damage, real, lasting damage, to the organization's relationships, its reputation in Japan, and its internal culture. And that damage required something more than a plain ticket and a contrite expression to repair. The word the GM had already used publicly was repent. The word being used privately now was harder. More final. Boycott. Not an official designation. Not a term that would appear in any press release. But among the players, among the coaching staff, among the people who filled the corridors and the clubhouse of that organization, a collective decision had quietly formed. Murakami was not welcome. Not now. Perhaps not again. The players who had been his teammates, men he had trained alongside, eaten meals with, exchanged early morning nods with in the weight room, did not reach out. Did not send messages of support. Did not quietly signal through back channels that they were still in his corner. The silence was complete. And in baseball, silence is its own kind of statement. To understand why the boycott formed so quickly and so completely, you have to understand what Murakami's original interview had done to the people around him. Professional baseball teams are, at their core, small communities. They spend more time together than they spend with their families during the season. They share flights, hotels, training facilities, medical staff. The bonds that form are not always deep, but they are real, and they are built on a foundation of mutual commitment, the unspoken agreement that everyone in the room is here for the same thing, pulling in the same direction. When Murakami stood in front of a microphone and declared that he was done with Japan, done with Samurai Japan, and done with the country that had made him who he was, his teammates heard something specific in those words. They heard a man who had decided that his individual journey was more important than any shared identity. Any collective obligation. Any loyalty to the people who had stood beside him. In American baseball culture, individual expression is valued. Players speak their minds. Contract negotiations are public. Trades are discussed openly. The culture has learned to hold personal ambition and team commitment in the same hand without dropping either. But there is a line. And the line is this: you do not make the people around you collateral damage in your personal declaration of independence. Murakami's interview had done exactly that. By publicly refusing any connection to Japan, the country that 4 of his White Sox teammates also called home, the country whose baseball federation had partnership agreements with the organization, the country whose fans made up a significant portion of the merchandise revenue that paid everyone's salaries, he had made a personal statement with professional consequences for others. His teammates were not angry because he had chosen America. They were angry because he had done it in a way that required them to answer for it. In every interview, every media session, every interaction with Japanese journalists, the question was now there, hanging in the air. What do you think about what Murakami said? Nobody had asked to be put in that position. Nobody had been consulted. And nobody had forgotten. Murakami found Ohtani. The specifics of where and how have been deliberately kept vague by everyone involved, which itself tells you something about how seriously both parties took the privacy of what was about to happen. It was not at a stadium. It was not at a team facility. It was somewhere quieter, more neutral, the kind of location you choose when you want a conversation to be a conversation, not a performance. Murakami had prepared for this moment for 12 hours of flight time and however many sleepless nights before that. He had thought about what he would say. He had rehearsed it, revised it, stripped it back to its essential truth. He was not there to negotiate. He was not there to explain himself or justify his interview or argue that the White Sox had overreacted. He was there for one reason. To apologize. He extended his hand. Ohtani looked at it. And then Ohtani said 4 words that, by all accounts, landed with the weight of everything they had ever been to each other. Go away. I'm done. He did not raise his voice. He did not deliver a speech. He did not list the ways in which Murakami had disappointed him or explain his reasoning or offer a pathway toward reconciliation. He simply declined the handshake, spoke those words, and walked away. People who know Ohtani well will tell you that this is, in its own way, more devastating than anger would have been. Ohtani does not often express displeasure openly. His default mode is patience, warmth, and an almost superhuman capacity to find something positive in difficult situations. When he closes a door, it is because he has already spent a long time deciding whether to close it. It is never impulsive. It is never theatrical. Which means that by the time Murakami extended that hand, Ohtani had already made his decision. Had probably made it before Murakami's plane had even landed. The handshake was not refused in anger. It was refused in conclusion. Yu Darvish once said something about Ohtani that now reads almost like a warning in hindsight. He said that what made Ohtani truly special was not his bat or his arm, but his consistency of character. The way he behaved when nobody was watching. The gratitude he showed to people around him even when he had every right to be consumed by his own excellence. The way he never let his own story become so loud that it drowned out the people beside him. Darvish also spoke about the homework he set for Samurai Japan players who wanted to emulate Ohtani. It was not about copying his diet or his training. It was about asking a deeper question every single day: am I the kind of person whose presence makes the people around me better, or am I making them carry weight they didn't ask to carry? Murakami, in his interview, had answered that question in a way that Ohtani could not overlook. Not because Ohtani is unforgiving, he is famously the opposite. But because Ohtani understands, perhaps better than anyone in baseball, what it costs to represent your country on the world stage. What it means to carry that flag. What you owe to the people who believed in you before the rest of the world knew your name. Murakami had not just rejected Japan. He had rejected the version of himself that Ohtani had stood beside in that WBC final. The version who cried at second base. The version who, for one perfect night, had carried an entire nation on his back and seemed genuinely humbled by the weight of it. Ohtani had watched that man get on a plane to America and, somewhere along the journey, transform into someone he no longer recognized. Murakami left that meeting and did not speak to the media. He did not issue a statement. He did not post on social media. He traveled back to wherever he was staying and, by all accounts, stayed there. The baseball world, meanwhile, kept spinning. The White Sox began their spring preparations without him. His locker remained assigned to him technically, but teammates moved around it the way people move around a space that used to hold something important and now holds only the memory of it. In Japan, the reaction was complicated. Some fans felt vindicated. They had warned that Murakami's interview would have consequences, that the baseball world operates on relationships and reputation as much as it operates on statistics and contracts. Others felt something closer to grief. This was, after all, the man who had hit that double. The man who had given them one of the greatest moments in Japanese sports history. Watching him stand alone in a parking lot in America, turned away by the person he had flown across the world to reach, it was difficult to reconcile with the image they had carried of him. Darvish, when asked about Murakami's situation in a brief media interaction during Samurai Japan's training camp, did not say much. But what he said was careful, and those who know him understood the weight behind it. He said that every player reaches a moment where they find out what kind of person they actually are. Not what kind of player. Not what kind of athlete. What kind of person. He said that those moments are painful. Necessary. And that what a man does in the days and weeks after that moment reveals more about his future than any statistic ever could. There is an image that will stay with everyone who followed this story. A young man, standing with his hand extended. The greatest baseball player in the world looking at that hand and choosing not to take it. 4 words spoken quietly. A back turned. Footsteps walking away. Murakami came to America alone to fix something. He left having confirmed that the thing he had broken was more serious than he had understood when he broke it. The question now is not whether his career survives this. Talented enough, young enough, hungry enough, those things will likely reassert themselves in time. The question is whether the person survives it. Whether the man who boarded that plane with hope and landed in rejection can find, Somewhere in that experience, the same thing Darvish found after his own painful years of self-examination. Not repentance in the way the White Sox GM meant it. Not a public apology performed for cameras and drafted by a communications team. But a real reckoning. A quiet one. The kind that happens in an empty room, without an audience, when a man finally stops arguing with himself and starts listening. Ohtani walked away from Murakami's hand. But Murakami still has two of them. The question is what he chooses to do with them next. Was Ohtani right to walk away, or should he have given Murakami a chance to explain? Tell us what you think in the comments.